This video will contain spoiler words, so just be aware before you watch this video. When you think of a main character in a sports anime, traits like determination, never giving up, and hard work comes to mind, right? Well, it's the opposite for Tokuchi Toua from the anime One Out. Tokuchi Toua is an expert in gambling and psychological tactics and traits. He looks like a gangster, he is a cocky and gambling genius, and his personality just has a badass presence to it. During the first episodes of the anime, Toua showcases an extraordinary record of 499 wins and 0 losses in the game One Out. Now, not to be confused with the actual anime name, this term is a simplified baseball version featuring only a batter and a pitcher. During the first interaction of Tokuchi, Kojima, a star batter of the weakest Japanese baseball team called Saitama Lycons, comes in dreaming of leading the Lycons to their first ever victory in ages. Now, this victory is not some ordinary normal victory, it's a championship. Now, he faces the dilemma of finding a replacement for their injured pitcher. He decides to engage in a game of one outs betting 400,000 USD. But if Tokuchi Toua loses, he has to break his right arm. Now, let's wait here for a second. Just imagine a random guy smoking a cigar betting 400k USD, not yen, like it's nothing. It's just crazy to think about. But that is just a glimpse of how Tokuchi Toua operates. Now let's just dive a bit deeper. Tokuchi first of all knows Kojima is a baseball player, and he kept this all in his mind and strategized this way beforehand. And he says in the episode that 400k is nothing for Kojima, which he initiates into making Kojima having to force him to bet this amount of money. Secondly, Tokuchi throughout the scene and the anime keeps a straight and calming face, showing Tokuchi's great confidence. Now the next interaction is with the team's owner and Tokuchi. Now the team's owner is a very greedy owner who refuses to offer Tokuchi a fair salary. In response, Tokuchi proposes a contract where he will receive 5 million yen for every out he pitches, but will lose 50 million yen for every run he gives up. Now, there is a very small chance for many to have success with this plan, and Tokuchi having a bland resume sheet allows for the owner to quickly agree. Now, to keep also in mind, the owner of the team is no ordinary owner. He's as well a very manipulative person and will do anything to get what he wants. So this was done for the benefit of the team, as Saikawa, the owner, had no plans to keep the Lycons and set up a deal to seal the deal and sell the team to the Tronpus company. Now, I've been talking all about his off-field situations, but let's move on to his on-field tactics where Tokuchi displays his manipulative skills. There are 3 major arcs I do want to cover within the anime. So putting aside Tokuchi's manipulation and tactics, let's just say he is very good at predicting and mind reading the opponent's next move. He was able to wipe out the entire Eagles team which he played against, which is just crazy. This rarely happens in baseball, especially in the professional baseball industry. So just keep that in mind, and to also put in some salt to the table, Tokuchi's pitches are not some extraordinary professional level pitches. They're just normal fastballs. So if you do know baseball, you know what I'm saying very well. Fastballs are pretty easy to hit, but Tokuchi Toua's incredible mind reading skills just sets him up from the part where he is able to mind read his opponents and set up a good fastball. Now, Tokuchi's first major game was against the Mariners, who ranked number 1 throughout the league, and they had 3 of the best hitters, one being Itsuki Takami. Now, just remember this name later on in the video. Out of the 3 games the 2 teams played each other, Tokuchi's ability was only revealed once throughout the anime by Itsuki. In the first game, Tokuchi would use his mind-reading skills throughout the game. Itsuki saw right through it, which allowed a possible chance for victory. But Tokuchi would see right through this and would pull out a quote-unquote gray card, which Tokuchi was not able to hit because of Tokuchi's unpredictability. Tokuchi was really impressed by this sort of knowledge that Tokuchi had, which not only made him afraid of him, but allowed for a more unpredictable gameplay from the Mariners. Now during the second game, which Tokuchi was able to right past the pitch, because Tokuchi, as I said before, is really unpredictable. You might think he will throw a fastball in the outer right position of the box, but he'll throw it in the lower position of the box, sort of like that type of mentality he has. But what came up handy was this round was Tokuchi's ability to see what pitches were coming next. So that's what I just reiterated. He is really good and a monster with the ball, and is just quite a monster in the field in general. For instance, Kojima had his right arm hurt, and Tokuchi knew the intentions of the pitcher. He will never underestimate his opponents and knows the capabilities of his teammates and the opponent. Something interesting to point out is that during the episode of the anime, Tokuchi knew what type of pitch the pitcher was going to make, so he told Kojima what pitch to be ready for. He did this by using an experiment he knew about and would explain it to the Lycone's catcher. The interesting part is that Tokuchi was able to do all of this within seconds and explained even in further detail that the Mariners pitcher would not want to hurt Kojima because of his famous batter and his status he has, and that it would only ruin the catcher's reputation using Tokuchi. Using this, Tokuchi was able to make Kojima get a successful home run and ultimately win the second game. While all of this was happening, the manager knows that Tokuchi will be tired and increases the rate of each run by 20 times, which is 1 billion yen per run. As per the last game against the Mariners, Tokuchi has not only got tired, but as well as gave up some runs away. He also at one point did fainted, but Tokuchi stood up like a Giga Chad and walked right past and told his rest of the team that he was okay. That's such a bold move. Well, back to the point, here we come to his second weakness, which was his stamina. Now, the team would eventually catch on onto Tokuchi's plan because it was going to rain soon. Now, here's the catch. If you know anything about baseball games, it will not count due to the heavy weather and something just bad happens unless the sponsor says so. So if the sponsors say continue the game, they have to continue the game. Tokuchi was able to rush the opponents by wasting his time and intentionally sabotaging the pitching area, which will come in handy soon. As soon as the Mariner pitching goes on, the pitcher did not take any practice shots, which allowed for many numerous runs and mistakes by the keeper that happens, while this was also the same incident that eventually occurred for the backup Mariner pitcher. Tokuchi was able to put emotional pressure to all of the Mariners players and eventually the main coach, which ultimately allowed for the head coach to forfeit the match. The funny part is that the manager thought he would gain some money, but ultimately lost money due to the baseball rules, which I won't get into too much detail. The second major arc I'm going to cover is with the Bugaboos, I know it's a funny name, and the Lycones. The Bugaboos have a foreigner in their team, which is able to run really fast, making it nearly impossible for any normal keeper to catch up with him. As the first game ended with the Bugaboos the Bugaboos coach would give valuable information on Johnson's speed and stamina, which was kind of a stupid move by him, but Tokuchi was able to not only calculate Johnson's speed, but as well as sacrificing runs in order to keep the Bugaboos in trouble. Another way was that Tokuchi was able to defeat Johnson is that he was able to point out that Johnson had his eyes always on the ball. This goes to show Tokuchi's skill on observation and strategy. Throughout episode 13, Tokuchi was able to set up traps and numerous sorts of ways for Johnson and the rest of the Bugaboos to get out. He was able to seal the second game with a dub by throwing a pitch a certain way for the catcher to be able to get Johnson out in the nick of time. On the last game between the two teams, Tokuchi showed an ability of confidence. This was shown when Johnson would clearly state that Tokuchi just uses tricks up his sleeve to get Johnson out, but not his real moves. Tokuchi would eventually prove him wrong and get Johnson out, which just left everyone speechless. Now, the last and final arc I'm going to be talking about is where the Lycoons would face the Blue Mars. Now, before I start, the owner of the Lycoons did plan out with the Blue Mars manager to do everything in his hand to cheat and to hurt Tokuchi, which would relieve the money owed to Tokuchi from the owner of the Lycoons. In episode 17, the Lycoons were defeated with the major problem that the opponent's star pitcher Williams can throw a knuckleball, which are basically impossible to hit. But this was where Tokuchi was able to find out that the knuckleball thrown by Williams was actually a fake. Tokuchi would ask the question if anyone can hit Williams' pitches, in which the head coach quickly replied with only Itsuki being able to hit his pitches. But this is where the twist is. Williams never pitched a knuckleball to him. This was due to the fact that if Itsuki was being thrown a knuckleball, he would quickly deduct it being a fake. He has that mentality and that capability to deduct things easily. As Tokuchi bring everyone outside to the pitch, he perfectly mastered the knuckleball to everyone's shock. But in reality, he did not. He would explain that the knuckleball was a fake and that they had put something in the ball that would basically shift the ball's movement. His observational skills would come in handy in the next game, where the Blue Mars would react in perfect time whenever the Lycoons pitched. Tokuchi would eventually find out that the signal was coming from a drummer in the stands, and that the players would act accordingly to the pitch of the drums. Now, this is where the info Tokuchi would actually use this to his plan and would actually manipulate the Lycoons assistant coach. Now, if you did watch this anime, you know that the assistant head coach is a quote-unquote dog of the Lycoons owner, and that the assistant coach is very easy to persuade if you bring up things like money to him. So basically, Tokuchi would easily offer a deal where even if Tokuchi would lose the game or Tokuchi would bring the team up to victory, the assistant coach would actually kind of win the bet, because there was an advantage towards the assistant coach, because he would actually win a sort of more money even if he loses or wins. But this was done accordingly to Tokuchi, because he knew if there was a winning scenario, the assistant coach would catch on to it and he would quickly accept the deal, which he did. Now, during the same game, Tokuchi would actually use a bunting technique to kind of confuse the opponent. Basically, it is where the initial batter will go on a bunting pose, then change his pose and not go for a bunt, but rather a different hit. This would prove to be successful, but only for a short amount of time. He would also use reverse psychology on Iduguchi. I always bust this name up so much. It's basically the Lycoons catcher, and what he did is, as Tokuchi put up the signal to steal home plate, Tokuchi knew that the catcher would not go for it, so his plans worked out. As the catcher went safely back to third base, the other runners were able to run and allow for more chaos on the field, resulting in runs being scored and the eventual wins of the Lycoons. Now, during the pre-game meeting, Tokuchi had a plan to change up the signs according to the batter's jersey numbers. This would not go to plan though for very long, because the Blue Mars would catch up. So Tokuchi would keep telling the coaches to change up the signals, but this still did not work. But this was all done in Tokuchi's plan. This was done to deduct if the Blue Mars wire trap was close by. In episode 22, Tokuchi would eventually gather the team around for another plan change. But before Tokuchi would do this, he would actually throw the baseball bucket on the field for all the ball men to gather. Ball boys, ball men, same thing. This was done because the wire trap that was executed by the Blue Mars was actually the ball men standing right by the dugout. And this makes sense since they would hear every single word from the assistant manager. While Tokuchi threw the ball out into the field, he would gather the team and change the pattern of the technique to the sum count of each pitch. Now, the sum count of each pitch would be the number of strikes and the number of balls. Now, this was done to not only distract the ballman into thinking that there was a plan, but to also distract the manager into thinking that the plan would actually work out in his favor. But this is where the twist comes in later in the game, as he stated to Kojima and the catcher that he would give slide signals to the players in which the ballman would hear the initial call from the manager, and this would eventually mess up the Blue Mars defense. Now, this plan eventually failed due to the players and manager clumsiness. Now, when it was the Lycoons team to pitch, Tokuchi would tell the team to only wait for the sinkers or the fastballs thrown by Williams. At the end of the episode of 23, Tokuchi would go up and bat. Now, he would exploit the weakness of the knuckleball, and as Williams pitch, it flew out of the catcher's hand, allowing Tokuchi to run. He knew that the catcher and Williams had 2 balls, one being the normal ball and one being the fake. Tokuchi would eventually use this to his advantage and steal bases because Williams has the knuckleball, and throwing the knuckleball to get Tokuchi out will not only make him not catch Tokuchi, but instead it was due to the fact that the spinning motion could make him suspected of cheating. Now he abused this to get right past the defense and score a point during the game. Now during the end of the episode, the secondary Blue Mars pitcher Mina Mishiba has a reputation of lacking the control and lacking basically the overall control of the pitches. Now this was actually a tool for him to hide his true powers. With the first 2 pitches, he had the intention to injure Tokuchi. Now Tokuchi does not let things like that slide. With his next turn, as Tokuchi would swing, he would actually swing the bat right through the pitcher, and it would actually almost hit his head. And he did this 2 times, showing his dominance in the field. Now another incident that did occur was at the start of episode 25, where Tokuchi is in the first base as a catcher, and as the batter ran to get the first place play, they would actually both collide. Now this was all an act from the Blue Mars to resort in injuring Tokuchi. Now this was all seen through from Tokuchi, and eventually Tokuchi actually was not hurt. The most important part now comes where Najima, a Blue Mars player, would come to Tokuchi to ask if he was alright. But this is where the most dirty trick comes to play. If you look closely in the anime, he would actually put something on Tokuchi's back pocket. Now as time went on, it was like Tokuchi's time to pitch. Now it was told from the owner and the owner of the Lycons that, quote unquote, the injury incident was not to injure Tokuchi but to bait him into the pitching area. Now as Tokuchi pitched the ball, the batter would point out to the umpire that the pitch was strange, and if you look closer at the ball, there was a scratch mark from it. Now with this, the Blue Mars plan was to take Tokuchi and was to make Tokuchi not suspect of anything in his body, and he does agree to a search, which goes to the Blue Mars plan. But as he stated to the umpire that he will only oblige to the rules if everyone who touched the ball was checked. Now the thing is that Kawabata, the one who found the scratch, actually had a separate piece of sandpaper which he used to scratch the ball, and he would secretly pass it on to one of his teammates, which would make him not guilty. Now as Kawabata and everyone were being searched, actually there was something that turned out that Kawabata had the sandpaper in his back pocket. This sparks some emotional turn up for Kawabata as he tries to tell Tokuchi that he is sorry. Tokuchi knew all about this from the start of this incident, because he actually noticed the sandpaper on the back of his pocket. Now he would call Itaguchi at that time and would secretly get the sandpaper out and put it on Kawabata's pocket. Now what Tokuchi did next would probably surprise you. He told Kawabata to kneel down in front of him, and this was done to show his dominance against the Blue Mars. Now he would forgive the Blue Mars, but he did this only because he knew that he was going to win the game, because there was a call on the field that the game could resume. Now the Blue Mars manager ran out of all tricks, leading to the most anticipated moment of not being last in the league for 3 years of time for the Lycons. Now Tokuchi's rampage will continue on for a while. You should read the manga in your interest, and chapter 82 will continue your journey on Tokuchi's way to the championships.